Okay, we're live.
All right. Wait till we see a few people pop in and. All right, here we are again. We're going to kind of chit chat for a little bit. Wait till people jump in here. You have an echo in there? Can you turn that down? Well, here we are. Happy Saturday virtual tasting again, I guess. Eric and I are here going to talk about a couple different wines, mostly the different vintages of Lenne Estate, but we wanted to talk a little bit about the Chardonnay at first before we get into that, because a lot of people are curious about Chardonnay and what we do with it. We are going to actually taste 2014 through 2018 Lenne Estate today. But we're going to start with the two Chardonnays, the 2018 Chardonnay and the 2017 Scarlet's Reserve. So the vineyard today, we're out at the vineyard. We had bud break this week, and we've had this beautiful, gorgeous, 70-degree weather all week, and today it turned more like typical Oregon. So today we have kind of overcast, showering off and on, which I never complain because I like to see water in the springtime. Because we dry farm, we don't irrigate any of our vines, so we like to see a good reservoir of water as we go into to each vintage. By the way, I just want to mention to everybody, if you don't have to do this right now, but if you ever want to access the Winemaker notes, and most of these wines that we're talking about today, I think all of them, there are Winemaker notes on the website, and you have to go to the very bottom of the page, and there's a little red bar, and in the red bar it says trade. And if you click on trade, that's really a section that we have for media, for writers to go to, so they can access information, labels, and Winemaker notes, and we have my bio and Eric's bio and different things on there. But it's a great place for consumers to go as well. So you can access, and for club members, and you can access the Winemaker notes. All these notes are on there that were all the wines that we're going to go through tonight. So just a little info for you. All right, so we wanted to talk about Chardonnay tonight because to start off, because we started making Chardonnay in 2016 was our first Chardonnay from some vines that were planted in 2001 that we grafted from 777 Pinot Noir over to Dijon 76 clone Chardonnay. And we did that in 2015 and started producing our first wine in 2016. So the wines we have here today, we have our current release of Chardonnay, which is the 2018 Chardonnay. And then we have the Scarlet's Reserve. And so the way these wines are made is kind of interesting. So I had a kind of a conceptualized how I'd like to make Chardonnay. And then I ran into a guy whose name's Drew Voigt, and he had some interesting ideas. He's a very interesting winemaker. He used to be winemaker for Domaine Serene, now does his own custom crush. So we basically hired him to do some consulting on the Chardonnay, and I had this image of the way I wanted to make it. I wanted to make it in a way that was not too oaky, but I wanted it to have a lot of texture that you normally get from oak, but I didn't want it to have the aromatics and the astringency that you normally get from putting wine in small oak barrels. So we decided to make the wine in pungents. We ferment it in pungents, which are big. They're about 2.5 times the size of an oak barrel, and I thought that would be a great way to do it. And so usually we make 2 pungents worth, and then usually about 3 or 4 other barrels, and we usually will use those barrels will be neutral barrels. With our pungents, we usually have 1 new and 1-year-old pungent, and that's kind of the program here. But the really interesting thing, and that was kind of my perception of how I wanted to make it, and really one of the interesting things Drew brought to the table was that the way he makes Chardonnay is he prematurely oxidizes it, the juice, before he starts fermentation. Some of you may have seen the movie Bottle Shock, where their Chardonnay turned brown, and it was kind of a dramatization of what really went on with that wine. That wine was actually made by a guy named Mike Gergich from Gergich Hills. But anyway, the wine, after they bottled it, it turned brown. And so what we do is we actually pump oxygen into the must after we press it out. So we'll take our Chardonnay, we'll bring it into the winery, we'll press it out, and then we basically aerate it. We essentially pump oxygen in there. And so, after a day, the wine, it really looks ugly. It turns brown. It looks like a cup of tea. And so what it is, it's basically all those phenolics binding to the oxygen, and so they drop out. And phenolics basically are going to give you some of that harshness in the wine. So we really want to start out with this beautiful, clean juice. And it really helps when we get to what we're trying to do, because we want this wine to be creamy without being astringent. And two main sources of astringency are grape skins, where these phenolics come from, and even though we press those off right away, we're still going to get some measure of phenolics in those wines. So this is a good way to drop those phenolics out before we even start, and then after they drop out, we put it in the barrel, we inoculate it, put it in the barrel, and we start fermenting it in the pungents, actually. Other thing that's really different about our Chardonnay, I'll tell you, there's the way Chardonnay is being made today in the Willamette Valley. There's a lot of different styles, but there's a very in vogue style now, which I really do not like. But a lot of people love it, and they're getting really great reviews. I'm sure if you set a blind tasting, you wouldn't like them very much, but they're getting these great reviews, so people are globbing onto them. And what winemakers are doing here is they're picking Chardonnay really on the lean side. When you pick Chardonnay on the lean side, before it's, in my mind, before it's ripe, you really get these lemon kind of aromatics out of it, and really high acidity. When you pick it really ultra ripe, you get pineapple out of it. And when you pick it where we pick it, you get pear out of it. And that's really the aromatic I'm looking for. I'm looking for a pear aromatic, and I'm looking for nice texture on the palate. The way these winemakers are doing these other Chardonnays, they're picking them really lean, and then they're using these really heavily toasted brand new barrels. And so what they're trying to do is, it's like a bad imitation of Burgundy to me. This is just my opinion. I mean, other winemakers would be like, what the hell are you talking about? This is, they would probably be aghast. If you're a winemaker listening to this who makes wine in that style, I'm sorry, I just don't like them. So we don't make our wine like that. They, to me, taste really acidic, and they just don't have the kind of aromatics I'm looking for. And they don't feel good to me. I want wine to feel good on my palate. And so all of our wines, red and white, they really need to feel good on your palate. And it is a little bit of a moving, floating target, a moving target, if you will, because wines will start off more acidic, and certainly age will round them out and change that. So I have my trusty sidekick, Eric, here. And we're just going to taste these wines, and we're going to pour some red wines, and we really want to get to the red wines and talk about this vertical. We're actually going to do a vertical of 14 through 18. I think we originally said 16, 17, and 18, and then I added the 15, and I thought, we have the 14, we might as well do them all. So we'll do those. But just in terms of the two Chardonnays, this is the 18 Chardonnay first. I really do get this pear aromatic out of this wine. I think it's a pretty fruit-driven Chardonnay. What do you think, Aaron?
Yeah, I would ask you to back up a little bit on you didn't plant Chardonnay here until, many years after the vineyard opened. Our first Pinot was 04. And you just weren't happy with how Chardonnays were. From what my understanding of the early days of Oregon Chard, they were trying to use mostly the Winté clone from Napa, which never got ripe enough. and they had to get some different clones. The 77.6 clone I think we used here.
Right.
And those were a little more cold climate suited. Is that why you waited a few years? I usually credit Karen, by the way, also. Your real sidekick, your lovely wife.
Yeah, that's probably more like it, because I wasn't even thinking about Chardonnay when we first started. It was just not even in my mind, and it's true because most of the Chardonnays came from this Wintier, this 108 clone, which was really selected for its propensity to ripen slowly in warm climates. So it really didn't work in Oregon. We just had these terrifically high acid wines. Although the flip side is that some people are having success with that clone now because we're warming up, but I don't think we're warm enough to make it work on a consistent basis. So, but I wasn't thinking about. I was just thinking about Pinot Noir, and my wife really loves Chardonnay, and kind of kept putting the bug in my ear. And geez, I wish we had some Chardonnay. I wish we had some Chardonnay. And then I finally thought, well, let's graft some Pinot over and we'll make some Chardonnay. So, yeah, there we go.
But the grafting was our lowest 12 rows, lowest elevation, right by the front gate. Was that intentional, the richer soil down there for Chardonnay?
It's not really rich soil, but it's. I thought it was going to be just a really the easiest place, and I thought, I knew we'd have no problem getting ripeness there. It's really, it kind of has a west roll to it right in there, so I knew it would be a pretty warm part of the vineyard, and that's really kind of why we went with it. So the real differences, I just wanted to mention a couple more things, then we'll get off the Chardonnay and go to the reds. The real differences with the 18 Chardonnay, and then we have the 17 Scarlet's Reserve Chardonnay. In fact, we're just bottling the 18 on Monday, the 18 version of the Scarlet's Reserve, and that should be ready by summer. But the difference here is that normally every year we make somewhere around 100 cases of Chardonnay, and well, really about 150 cases. At the time we bottle our regular Chardonnay, it'll sit in the pungence for about 11 months, and then we'll bring it out, we'll clarify it, we'll bottle it. At that time, we take about 50 cases worth of Chardonnay out and transfer it to a stainless steel tank. And we transfer the lees that we stir it up before we do that in the barrel, and we transfer the lees with that into the tank. So we want it to sit on these yeast lees, and they basically, the yeast is dead at this point. And it autolyzes, it breaks up, and it really adds this creamy kind of texture. It's really how sparkling wine, how champagne's made. It sits on that yeast, and that yeast dies, and it really adds that kind of, when you get the really good French champagne, and it has that beautiful creamy texture to it. Well, that's kind of what we're doing in here, but we're also looking for different aromatics. So the 17 Scarlets, the aromatic is much more, it has much more of this brioche kind of aromatic to it, a little bit of this, you basically, you do that a little bit at the expense of kind of that fresh fruit, but what you get is you get a little bit more complexity, and you get a little bit of that brioche kind of aromatic, and so that's kind of what we're really trying to do with that wine. So it's called Overwintering Chardonnay. It's something that, again, Drew Voigt kind of brought this concept to me, and he said, "Hey, you want to overwinter some Chardonnay?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, we'll pull some out, put it in stainless steel, and we'll just let it sit on the yeast, and we'll see how it goes." And so that's what we're doing with it, and I think it's really complex Chardonnay. Really has this beautiful creamy texture, that little brioche aromatic. I love what we've done with this Chardonnay. I think between Drew and myself, we were just kind of hit this on the head, and I love what's happening with it. So anyway, we hope you guys like it too. We make a limited amount of this. We don't sell our wines, as most of you know. Almost 99.9% of our wines are sold right out of this room. So if you want it, this is the only place to get it. All right, let's get into the Pinot. You want to say something?
One thing on the Chard. Before I worked with Lenne, I was in a winery from Walla Walla, and we had white wines, but they were Viognier, Marsanne, Roussanne. We didn't have the Chardonnay. And the amount of people who have come in here the past 2.5 years, and they see Chardonnay and they go, "Ugh, I don't like Chardonnay. It's too buttery. It's too oaky." And people jokingly say they are in the ABC club, as I'm sure people have heard, anything but Chardonnay. And we say, no, try it. And it's amazing how many people have only ever had $8 glass of house Chardonnay, you know, wedding wine Chardonnay. Somebody said they had a Southwest Airlines Chardonnay. And so we're not going to name any producers for this, but you can kind of imagine what that Chardonnay tastes like. And then they get the Oregon Chardonnay and they go, oh, I actually like Chardonnay. It's crisp and refreshing. And it's a whole different style. So if any of you guys listening have only ever had kind of that wedding wine Chard or big buttery types, you might be really surprised and interested to try some Oregon Chardonnay. And the way I usually describe the reserve Chardonnay here is it's creamy, but it's not buttery. So it's got this real interesting, like Steve was saying, the textural notes, the softer mouthfeel to it, but it's a really different style than the more crisp, acidic kind of Pinot Gris style taste, kind of texture. The flavor's very different than that. But anyway, it's on to Pinots.
And if you drink our Chardonnays, I'm just going to tell you that they should be drinked cool, not cold. Should be drunk cool, not cold. You get them too cold, it's really going to kill the texture. You're not going to get nearly as much out of them. All right, so now we're going to get into Pinots, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the years. We talked about the years last week, a few of the different vintages. So there's a little bit of rehashing, but I think it's worth doing because a lot of you probably weren't here, and we're going to explore some new territory here.
And we didn't cover 14 or 15 at all.
We didn't cover 14 or 15. So the 14 Pinot is something that if any of you are interested, we've got 7 cases left, and then it's bye-bye to that one forever. It's the only 14 we have left here at the winery. They always get better at this point because no substitute for bottle age, and this is almost 6 years old now. So it's the biggest. Was our biggest production wine in 14. I think we made almost 700 cases of this. 14 was a big vintage. We had a really big fruit set, and so there was a lot of wine going around. And I think 14 vintage is very similar to the 17 vintage, with a couple minor differences. So 14, for those of you who didn't live through it, most of you probably haven't, unless you lived in Oregon and you pay attention to farming. So that probably eliminates 99.9% of you. But I'm here every day, and the vintages, I'm just living through them, and I remember them all. I do keep some notes about each vintage, when bud break was, for instance, and when we did certain things, and but I really just have a good sense of vintages, having just been here and farmed this vineyard, over the last 20 years. So the 14 vintage, really warm vintage. And again, one of those remarkable vintages, very much like 17, these two vintages really parallel each other. Hot vintages. I'd have to go back and look it up, but we definitely had way above our average of usually on we get so many 90-degree plus days in a year, and
usually about 10 to 12.
Yeah, and we definitely got well over that in 2014. So it was a hot vintage, but we had a big fruit set. If you're going to have a warm vintage, you need a big fruit set, because what it does is the vine can only has so many carbohydrates to ripen fruit, and when there's a lot of fruit, it basically slows everything down, which in a hot vintage is exactly what you want. In a cool vintage, you don't want a lot of fruit. You want to start taking fruit off. But in a warm vintage, you really like, in this part of the world, I really like to see a lot of fruit because it really slows ripening. So again, in 2014, I was a little bit worried midway through the vintage. I thought, oh my gosh, we're going to be making these, big high alcohol wines, and it really never materialized. The wines are all slightly below 14%. This is probably 13. I can't remember off the top of my head. It's 13.6, 13.9. So again, we didn't push over 14% on any of our wines in 2014, which I really like. I love wines that are developed that they're ripe from a taste point of view. The flavors are developed, but not the sugars. If you can get that, my favorite wines, which are represented certainly by 3 vintages here, are vintages that are the flavors are developed, but they're not, the sugars didn't develop, so we don't have real high alcohol wines. Alcohol gives a certain viscosity, which is a crowd pleaser in a way. I get that. It really hits you on the first part of your palate and with this viscosity, and so it gives a kind of an artificial weight to wines, but the best wines to me are wines that are dense without having that high alcohol. What I love about this wine right now is it's the most developed of any wine on the table here because it's almost 6 years old. So our wines start getting the sandalwood aromatic as they start to get older, and this is just starting to get that now. And texturally, I love what's going on the palate. It's definitely getting, it hasn't gotten that velvety richness that's when the light switch goes off in my head and I think, oh my gosh, there's nothing I'd rather drink in the world. Usually that happens kind of around the 8th year, depending on the vintage. 8th year out from the vintage date. So here we're about 6 years out from the vintage date, and it's definitely getting a nice texture. Certainly got definitely more complex aromatically than anything on the table here right now. What do you think, Eric?
It's getting that kind of, we often mention mocha in our wine.
Yes.
People joke, we look at our tasting flight and we don't try to get too specific. I see some tasting notes and there's like poems in them, it's just, there's so many people, I think people play what I call bingo. If there's too many fruit notes, can you find a black cherry in this? That's all they do instead of tasting the wine. And we tend to be a little bit more minimal in that way, but all of our wines come from a small vineyard, so there's obviously, some comparable flavors. And we mentioned mocha quite a bit in the aromatics. So I think this is actually getting almost to a chocolate note even after 14 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's every wine we've ever made has that aromatic. It's I always call it the signature. Yeah, I agree with you when you say big does not mean high alcohol. Absolutely. But anyway, the mocha is what we call a terroir aromatic of Lenne, and it's not just Lenne. That aromatic pops up in other vineyards that are on this sedimentary soil, but I will say that it's very strong in our particular vineyard. And every wine we've ever made, there's a certain point where I go, oh yeah, that's a Lenne wine. It just smells like Lenne to me, and a big part of it is that really that terroir, that mocha aromatic that we get in the wine. This 14 is still firm. Don't you think it's pretty firm? Acidic wine. I mean, it's still got a fair amount of acidity, and were very fresh, fruit-forward, fresh, high-acid wines when we came out with them, which is not what you would expect. You would not expect the acidity from a really hot vintage like that, but
it's still got some brightness in it now.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not getting flabby at all.
No, absolutely. This wine, I will be really shocked if you were to drink this wine. Now, I'm not going to recommend you guys wait if you have this, but I would be really shocked if this wine wasn't tasting good at 2030. I mean, it's really, it's got good acidity. I think it's got relatively low pH. Should hold this wine up pretty good, and it's going to develop really a ton of richness as it gets older. So, hard to resist right now. It's kind of been my go-to wine the past, I have a couple, but this has certainly been one of them the past 3-4 months. Because it's really starting to taste great. Okay, 2015. Moving on to the 2015.
Really different nose. I mean, compared to
yeah,
it doesn't have that. It's not creamy. It's kind of thinner and a little bit harsh almost, but it's got a big earthy note to it.
Yeah, it does have a big earthy note. I mean, the 15 vintage to me was really interesting. It kind of parallels the 2006 vintage in a way that we had a warm vintage again, but here we had we didn't have as much fruit as we had in 14, and so I think the wine certainly shows a little bit more like a warmer a warmer vintage. It's not over the top by any means, but you're looking at about 14.25% alcohol now, a little bit higher alcohol. And the weird thing about the 15s, one of the good things about them, which wasn't good early on, but it ended up being a really good thing, is it's the most tannic vintage that I've ever experienced in the Willamette Valley. And not just for us, for everybody. The wines were tannic from 2015 because we had a lot of small, thick-skinned berries in 2015. So the wines, to me, have a lot of concentration, but they had just loads of tannin. I mean, believe me, when we first brought them out, they would take the enamel right off your teeth. I mean, they were just really pretty hard to drink.
Yeah, I would pour for people to go, just do this for 20 seconds.
Yeah.
It'll help, it'll make a difference. Your tasting notes for, decant this, give it some time.
And the weird thing about it is that they didn't really present themselves that way in the barrel. I probably would have found that tannin out of there, but when we bottled them, boy, it really came out. So these are, and I think that right now, I think if a lot of you were to taste these wines, my guess is a lot of you are going to glob onto this 15 vintage. We only have, by the way, we do have like
a case and a half.
Case and a half left if anybody wants any. Same price. We didn't raise the price of this.
We were going to pour all we had left at the SIP show in McMinnville about a month ago.
Right.
We had 3 cases left, and they got canceled the last minute, of course, for obvious reasons. So we have a little bit left here. If you guys want some, you're welcome to get it. But yeah, we have like a case and a half, and that's it forever.
And they're really flavorful wines. I mean, they're bigger. They're a little bit bigger than the 14 or say the 16 vintage or the 17 vintage. But I think that a lot of you are really going to like these wines a lot. The tannins are definitely even out. There's still some underlying tannin in these wines, but the good part is I think they're going to age beautifully. I mean, they're going to be, for those of you that like big, rich, these wines are really going to be rich. That tannin will add to the richness as they age. And I don't think even that long. I mean, these wines will be around for a long time, but I think 2-3 years from now, just going to be delicious. I mean, there'll be wines that you won't want to stop drinking once you open them. And they'll be good, with big cuts of meat or by themselves.
2 things on 15, Steve.
Yeah.
As far as I know, it was the record number of days over 90 by a lot.
Hot year.
Like 40 days above 90.
Yeah, I don't think we had 40, but we definitely had over 30 for sure. Yeah.
That was the year I was actually house hunting. I ended up buying a house in Lafayette just down the road here. And I was house hunting in August. And every day I went out with a realtor, it was like 97 degrees. So it was very noticeable. It's like anywhere you walked in without air conditioning, it was just like, nope, walk right back out. But that was a really hot year. I believe you used more new oak than usual in that year, Steve, for most of ours?
We did have a fair amount of new oak in some of these wines. This one doesn't have that much new oak. I can't remember. It's like somewhere around 25%.
I thought the Carolines in the South look like 80%.
Yeah, we did on some of the single clones. We had a lot of new oak in them, but this one is not. It doesn't. I think it's somewhere around 25%. I'd have to go back and look at the notes. But these wines are tannic, so they're not nearly as tannic as they were, but yeah. No, I'm sorry, we don't have any 12 left. If I did, it would be very, very well. Last time we were selling a Lenne Estate 12 2 years ago for $100, I think.
Yeah, it sold very well.
I mean, yeah, you would think $100 bottle of wine, and I wish we would have had. We only had 25 cases and didn't last the summer. So the 12s are beautiful wines right now. And if you like 12, I would say these 18s are going to be right up your alley. All right, let's go on to the 16. Now, this wine is, I love this vintage. You guys have heard me say this before. I love this vintage. Here you have a wine that has density but still light on its feet. Really hard to get that. Nature gives you that. You don't coke. I mean, that's just what nature gives you some years. Happened in 2008, happened for us in 2010. And it really happened in 2016. I think these are just really fantastic wines. And by the way, all these Lenne Estate wines, almost all of them are half Pommard as the dominant single clone in these wines. And then they're a mix, they varies a little bit year to year, but they're really a mix between the other 4 clones in varying proportions. Sometimes they'll have a little more 115 or 114 in it, or 667, 777. But generally, Pommard is the base of all of these wines. And it's almost in almost all these wines, it's right near 50%. Pommard is a clone, has a lot of complexity, and next week we're going to talk about single clone wines. In fact, I might dig up an older single clone wine just for fun, and we'll taste that, which would be kind of fun. But anyway, 16 vintage was really a unusual vintage again, in that it was, of the vintages we're tasting on the table here, it was the most moderate vintage. Yet it started the earliest, which is really strange. It started really early, and I thought, oh, we're in for just, going to get slammed. We're going to be ripening right in the middle of August, which is not what you want. One of the things that characterizes Oregon Pinot, makes it what it is that we have these beautiful, cool Septembers, really cold September nights, slows everything down. Well, when you start, we had bud break. We had bud break in, I'm thinking we were, by now we were full on into it. We had bud break in March. I can't remember exactly when, but it was, everything was a month early in 2016. And it was really like that the whole season. It was almost like everything just got pushed a month ahead. So when we finally got to August, instead of having a really hot August, we had an August that was very much like September. And it was really cool and moderate. So the 16 wines, I think we pulled them in, the first 2 weeks of September. We were done by the middle of September in 2016. But we had just beautiful balance in the wine. Again, moderate alcohol. None of them are over 14%. We only have 3 16s left. We have 16 Lennes. Probably the best Lennes we've ever made, in my opinion. We have...
I had some last night.
Isn't that gorgeous?
It's really got pepper. It's got more than 67.
Yeah.
It's really earthy and darker.
It's really a beautiful wine. Lenne Estate, a little more complexity, and again, because it's got a lot more Pommard in it versus 777. So I think that's not all bad. Somebody just said they had to use the Pommard instead of because they didn't have any Lenne Estate.
Yeah,
that's tough. It's dirty work, but somebody has to do it. Anyway, I think that this 16 Lenne Estate is more complex than the Lennes, but it's a little bit more refined than the Lenne. The Lennes is a pretty big wine for as far as the Lennes go. I mean, we had that 777 got really dark and pretty good body compared to what it normally gets. This one is a little bit more elegant, a little bit more refined, maybe a little bit less coarse in a way, and that's what we're shooting for. We basically, these are all barrel selections, so all of the different tiers we have are just different barrel selections. So we go through, we pick out essentially the best barrels first. Those all go into the single clone wines and the Saint-Cloud. The Saint-Cloud is our best barrel from each of our clonal blocks, so it has all 5 clones in it. And we'll do a tasting of those. We're kind of in between vintages at the moment, but we're going to have a new release of that pretty soon. But anyway, so these are, we make everything the same, we grow it the same, we just get it all into barrels, block by block, clone by clone, and then we go in and start tasting. When we find something we like better, we basically make 3 chops. We basically chop the initial stuff off, and all that goes into the Saint-Cloud or the Lenne Estate, the single clone wines in the South Slope. And then the next tier is Lenne Estate, and then whatever doesn't make that tier goes into Lennes. And they all have more in common than they do. They're all the same pedigree. It's just that we're looking for the very best parts of the vineyard and separating out. But I always tell people, our Lennes sometimes is like other people's single clone wines or their barrel select wines. I mean, it really is very indicative of the vineyard. We don't make it any different. We don't crop the vineyard any different. So it's really the same pedigree, and especially with bottle age, they get closer together. All right, so the 16, any comments on the 16?
Just even the first sniff, it's so silky. I mean, compared to the big earthier notes in the first two ones. But then the mouth feels very rich. It's very rich and complex. It's got a little bit of that kind of that umami note almost to it. It's got that creamy texture. You really get the balance, I think, more in the 16.
It is beautifully balanced wines. I think the 16s in my mind, they're just, I don't know that we can make much better wine than these 16s, but that's my palate. Every vintage has a different palate, and you have to find what vintage is the expression of your palate and what you like. And I have a different perspective because I also see how wines age here, and all these wines on the table will age beautifully 10 years out from the vintage. If you wanted to drink any of these wines 10 years out from the vintage, do you think you like our wines now? Wait till they're 10 years old. Then that's when you're really gonna like the wines. So, all right, 17. The 17 vintage is a vintage that I've really been having the aha moment lately. I said this last week, but it's really true. This vintage just wasn't thinking about it at all until about a month ago. I mean, and this is so typical. This happens to me all the time. We're kind of consumed with getting it into the bottle, aging it. Once these wines all sit in barrel for about 11 months. I'm always caught up in the vintage, and then once we get them in the barrel, I kind of make a preliminary judgment of what I think the vintage is going to be, and it always surprises me. And so, hey Todd, how's it going? Glad you're here. It always surprises me. At a certain point, I'll just say, I wonder what that wine's doing, and I'll pop a bottle open and I'll go, there it is. There's a Lenne wine. And this, I love these 17s. This was a vintage very much like 14. Hot vintage, again, huge fruit set, even bigger than 14, gigantic fruit set. And my big worry during the middle of this vintage was that we were going to hit warm weather later in the vintage, and we were going to have dehydration because these were pretty big, thin-skinned berries. And I just really didn't think they were going to make wine like this. These wines, to me, have this real piercing kind of finish to them.
Laser beam.
They really are like laser beams. And I didn't foresee that coming. And that's really what I love to see in our wines. I love this piercing kind of finish that just kind of keeps going and going and going.
One thing you say a lot to people I think really works well, Steve, is you mentioned it's like a snapshot of a movie or a snapshot of a longer time frame. So what you're getting today is what it tastes like today, but of course, as we all know from tasting these, they really do evolve over time.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you really just, people always come in, they say, what's your favorite? And I say, well, right now I can tell you what I think's drinking the best from my palate, but if you came back in a year, it might be something totally different. The 17s are definitely more on the red fruit spectrum. So what happens with Pinot, remember when I told you a little bit about Chardonnay, how on the very unripe part of the spectrum, they're lemon, and on the overripe part of the spectrum, they're pineapple. So with Pinot Noir, I would say on the real cooler part of the spectrum, if it's a really cool vintage, they're really bright cherry, like real red cherry, choke cherry, red cherry, not like a deep bean cherry. And then if you get them really ripe, they tend to move more towards black cherry on the other side. And if they're really overripe, they're plum. Okay, if they're overripe and they're plum, they're kind of tasting like Syrah. And we don't really want that. We're going to naturally get more black fruited wines where we are because we have this sedimentary soil. If you go up in the Dundee Hills, and you get more really red fruited wines as a rule, and they're the wines in the Dundee Hills are different. They're on volcanic soil, and so they're more of these red strawberry, raspberry kind of aromatics. We're on sedimentary soil, so we get more of these black fruited, black cherry, black raspberry, a lot of earth and chocolate and things like that in our wines. So they're both really good. They're just different. And I like this red fruit. This is if I were getting this wine in a blind tasting in 2017, I might even pick it out as a Dundee Hills wine. It's definitely more on the real red cherry side of the spectrum. And I just really like the way these wines feel on my palate. Now, I think a lot of you right now are actually, you're going to like some of the other wines better than these 17s right now. Some of you are going to really appreciate them and love them. They'll be just up your alley. But I think some of you, if I were doing these blind and you were in front of me, I think that a lot of you might like the 15 or I don't know anybody who's not going to like the 14 or the 16, but I think some of you would even prefer the 15 over the 17s. And but I really like what they have to offer, and I love where they're heading. These wines ought to be really fantastic, gorgeous wines with some bottle age, and I'm actually drinking them now and really enjoying them. And whereas 6 months ago, I wouldn't pick up a 17 hardly. I mean, they taste kind of like you always put it well. What do you say when you always say, oh, these 17 wines around the valley taste like?
They were very acidic and red fruited.
Yeah.
17 was an unusual year. You mentioned the really heavy fruit set last week and the really big, just a late, early ripening but really hot year. But the thing I think also was a factor was we had all that smoke that year from all the fires.
True. Yeah.
And I think that actually it was it blocked some sunlight.
Could have inhibited photosynthesis a little bit. Yeah.
And it probably, I think it was a combination, obviously, of that really heavy fruit set and the really big clusters. But then, if we had a really hot year all the way through September, probably wouldn't have been quite as expressive of the red style. Yeah, I go out tasting a lot. It's an occupational hazard, as I call it. And there's a lot of industry events and stuff. And just keeping track of the industry, who's doing what. We do some club shares, and it's fun to try other wineries. And 17s were just young. I mean, they just tasted young for a long time.
Yeah.
And they're coming around now. Ours are really getting. Just even noticing this now between last week, it's getting more of that kind of that candy, a little bit of candy, red cherry note to it.
Yeah, I think you used to describe them as tasting like cranberry juice.
Yeah, when they were young, they were cranberry, like cran apple.
Right. And it's true. I mean, we saw that with wines all over the valley were kind of like that. So, I think that if you cellar these wines, these 17s, I think that you're going to... I think you're really going to be happy with them. And I don't know, somebody just made a comment, hey Rick, that, they'll shut down and then come back. And that might happen. Pinot does that a little bit, and it can shut down and then come back. But I generally find if you want to age our wines, I would say that they don't really start showing their stuff until about 6 years out from the vintage. But when they really get developed, to me, is at the 10. I love drinking a lot of Oregon Pinots at 10 years out. I just think that's that they're going to be fruit. The fruit's going to be intact, but they're going to taste great generally. All right.
One last thing. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned the kind of the Dundee Hills, the more red fruit style. Today, if not for the quarantine, we had a blind tasting scheduled for this morning, which is my favorite of the blind tastings we do. And we do, I mentioned, we do some blind tastings here at Lenne, which no one else in the area does that I know of. Open to the public, I mean. And we had the one today was the red versus black. And we would have had 4 wines from the Yamhill-Carlton area, which is the more black fruited, and 4 wines from the Dundee Hills area, which is the more red fruited. And that one is fun because it's great to try the wines, but it's also fun to try to figure out which ones are from which region. And we did this testing, we didn't have one last year, we had one I think in 16 or in 17. And you and I both got 6 of the 8, and we were debating. I think I can't recall which one I missed, but it was really fun to try to figure those out. And we'd already bought a couple of wines for that this year before the quarantine thing came in. So we had really premium stuff. I mean, we had, Alexana and I think a Domaine Serene we were going to have. We're not putting in like $25
No.
Safeway wine. These are $80 and up usually.
If you've never been to one of our blind tastings, you definitely have to check them out. And that is a really fun one, the red and black one, because it does give you a real good education on what the differences are between Dundee Hills Pinot and Yamhill Carlton Pinot, and they really are quite different. All right, let's get on to the 18s.
Different nose on this one.
Yeah, so, 18, I really suspect that the 18s are going to just garner really crazy good scores. I mean, across the valley, it's a vintage that seems to be set up for reviewers' palates. They're really in-your-face kind of wines. There's nothing shy about them. They got a lot of everything. They're big in body and just, but they're balanced. They're still balanced wines. They've got, I think what holds them together is they've got pretty good tannin levels. Not quite like the 15s. They're not coarse. I mean, the 15s were really coarse when we first came out with them. They were hard to drink. These aren't like that. I mean, you start drinking these and you can't stop drinking them. I think last week, I don't want to offend anybody, I called them slutty wines. They are definitely, they're in that vein. I mean, they're just rich. They're
voluptuous.
Yeah, voluptuous, opulent, whatever you want to call them. They're all of the above. 18, again, was another warm year. Above average number of 90-degree days, and what happened with 18s is we didn't have the huge fruit set. We had a more normal fruit set, and we actually have pretty small, thick-skinned berries. Not quite as thick-skinned as the 15s, so we don't have the tannin levels in the 18s are. They're finer grain tannins. They're there. You really perceive them when you taste the wines, but they don't give you that kind of dehydrated chalk mouth. They're not like that. And one of the reasons is because the acidity on this is just slightly, and we're talking slightly lower than the rest of the wines on the table here. And so when you have a lot of fine grain tannins, if you have a high acid wine or fine grain or coarse tannins, but especially coarse tannins, if you have a high acid wine and you have a lot of tannin in there, you cannot drink those wines. Those wines, I mean, AK, also known as young French Burgundies, they're just undrinkable to me. So you really would like, if you have a warm vintage, you need structure. We get structure from a couple of things. We get it from acidity, we get it from tannin, and alcohol to some degree in a way. But you definitely need, if you have a lower acidity, you definitely need tannin. Really works well with it because the tannin adds to richness. Doesn't give you that cotton mouth kind of feeling. It really adds to the richness of the wine if the acidity is a little bit lower. And I think that's what we have in the 2018 wines. So I think the wines are going to age really well because they've got all this tannin in them. And I really think that tannin is one of the, it's an antioxidant and it really holds wine together. We know that acidity and tannin hold wines together. And I actually am thinking that tannin is almost a better glue to hold wine together over the long runs than acidity, because acidity, I've had wines that they don't have much fruit, but they still have acidity, 20 years down the road. Tannin is, I think, really does hold wines together better in a way. So, thank you guys for the great comments. I really appreciate them. I think the 18 is younger. If you had the 18 4 years from now, I mean, I think you're going to go gaga over it. I mean, even I, who, I have this winemaker palate where I'm looking at a lot of different things, and that's why I appreciate the 17s, even though they might not be as rich as some of the other wines, but right at the moment, I just see this long finish, and I think, these wines are going to be terrific. But these 18s are going to be, I'll love them for their whole life. I can love them I can really enjoy them right now, and I'm going to love them 10 years from now. And I think they're going to last longer than that. But I'm always very very reticent about aging wines for, recommending to people to age wines over 10 years past the vintage because, I don't know how people are storing them. I don't know, it's a crapshoot. I just want you, when you pull a cork on one of our wines, I want you to really enjoy that. And I know at 10 years out, you're going to enjoy that. I'm sure of that. At 20 years out, I'm not sure you're going to enjoy it. I don't know. We don't have a wine we only go back to '04, but all of our wines are intact. We don't have any wines that are over the hill yet, which is pretty interesting. By the way, one other thing I want to say about the 2018 wines. Starting with 2018, all of our corks are individually tested for TCA, which is the chemical that gives you that corked. All right, now I got to repeat that, Rick. Okay, so Rick, who works here, just made a great comment. He said, "I would date an 18 but marry a 17," and I think that's a really good way to put it. I mean, he just sums it up for me in a way. They'll be very pleasurable wines, for sure. And I think most of you will like them better than a lot of the other wines, because they are so flavorful. But anyway, I was just going to say, starting with 18, all of our wines are corked with they have new technology now where they can send an individual cork through a chromatography test. So not does it only pick up this chemical TCA that was responsible for this musty smell you get, and you've probably all had it. You pulled a cork on a bottle of wine and had this musty smell. They seem to have developed this technology where they can send these corks through really quickly, and it not only picks up TCA, but it picks up other volatile off aromas, and they separate them out. They're very expensive corks. We used an expensive cork before, and we've had really good luck. We haven't had many cork bottles of wine, but it does happen. Even with our wines, it does happen because you couldn't avoid it. But so far, and this is new, we've only just started to bring the 18s out, and we've not had any cork wine. Somebody asked the question. And by the way, you guys, we're kind of getting to the tail end of the tasting, so feel free to type your questions in, and we'll ask them. We'll answer as many as we can here. Somebody asked why we use a natural cork over a synthetic closure, and synthetic closures are put together with food-grade adhesives, and I think they're really unproven. And we know that there's been major lawsuits against companies thought they had the, advertising a taint-free cork, and then this adhesive broke down, and we had problems worse than being corked. I think most of technology is really advanced. I think most of those closures are really good right now. But how wine ages them, especially over 15-year period, is really something that I wouldn't want to take a chance on. Cork is very proven, and especially if you can get the taint out of it, which this technology claims to do. We'll see. So anyway, why the wax on top of the cork? It's purely aesthetic. Instead of putting a foil on our corks, we use this wax. We may go away from it at some point and use a foil. It really doesn't do anything as far as that I know, as far as keeping oxygen out of the wine, anything like that. It's just an aesthetic. We like it. It's simple. And it's just something that we used to hand dip all of our wines, which was a total pain, but we've gotten away from that. Eric, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I just noticed when you're trying the aromatics on these, the 14 is really reminiscent, I think, of the 18. The 18 tastes like it feels like a fruitier version of the 14. It's kind of got that texture, that depth, that like viscosity in the nose already. It just seems like it's got a little bit more earthiness compared to the 3. I mean, the ones in the middle are wonderful. The 16s, I think, I've been killing 16s lately here on quarantine. That's been my go-to. But just to get that denseness, I think, in the 18 that comes out. It's not quite as balanced as the 16s at this point. But it's got that really big, rich fruit note, and then it's got that textural note, too, in the first sip. So I think the 18s are just going to be amazing in a couple more years.
And I think one thing that you'll get out of all of our 18s is you're going to get that, in some of the wines, it's really more of a chocolate aromatic. And really, I think with the 18s, definitely more towards the black fruit. So I really see the 18s more as black cherry. I also find that in the 15s as well. When I taste the 17, I definitely get red cherry. I get more of a red cherry versus the black cherry. And the 16s are kind of their own animal. They've got this beautiful black fruit, but it's almost laced with a little like Parma violet or something. It's just they're really refined kind of. It's really refined kind of black fruit is the best way I can describe it. So, hey, somebody said keep doing these virtual tastings. We are, even after we come back online and get the tasting room open. We are definitely, we realized that we should have been doing this, 2 years ago, with our out-of-state members, and keeping them kind of, cause they don't get to come and visit, keeping them clued into what we're doing and the vineyard. So we would definitely have it on our agenda to keep doing these. For those of you who are local, hard to say when we're going to open up again, whenever the governor lifts the restriction, but I'm guessing it's coming. I would be really shocked if we're not open by the beginning of June.
We've been planning for social distancing and proper spacing, and like how we might do a wine pickup party where usually we have this amazing buffet of foods and pizzas, and obviously we'll have to limit that a little bit.
It's going to change.
Table service. We'll give you guys the same stuff, just have to probably get some reservations for time slots so we're not overcrowded at one point. But
yeah, it's going to change when it's going to be by appointment only, I think, for the foreseeable future, because we can only take so many people in the building.
Our staff will probably be looking like this for a while.
Yes, well, staff will probably be wearing masks here. I mean, there's a lot of encouraging news coming out now, and I think, it's, world's going to look different for a while for sure. I mean, we have folks who are really hard hit by. I know we have a couple of people who are watching right now. Really, our favorite tour operators, and they're down. I mean, their income's been just completely wiped out. And boy, we feel for all these guys. It's really tough here. So we're going to be open again soon. I think. I really think it's going to be. Oregon doesn't have a big issue, right? I mean, everybody has an issue, but we were pretty proactive, and so like I say, I'll be shocked if we're not online by beginning of June. It may happen more towards the middle of May. We'll just wait and see. But if you do come out, you just be prepared. It's going to be a little different. You're going to have to make an appointment, and you can just follow our website we'll update the website. And again, for those of you who got in late to the tasting, if you go to the bottom of the website, click on the trade page, you can download or just bring them up on your computer and look at notes for any of the wines. All right, Mark, we'll do that. And God love you guys. We're really going to look forward to seeing you again.
We miss having people here. This is our favorite part of the job, is doing this, but with other people as well. So.
Yeah, I ditto that. It's been really a little disconcerting not to be up here on a Saturday and not having a room full of people. I know we're going to get back to it. It's just it can't happen soon enough for me. But we're going to do it in a safe way, and keep our fingers crossed that we get some good antivirals out there to kind of nip the bud on this thing, and just pray for everybody. So. Anyway, so if anybody wants to order wines, go to the website. Don't be concerned if you order wine on the shopping cart and it doesn't calculate the discounts look like they're calculating wine fine now, but we can't seem to wipe out the shipping charge. But we do have some specials now. If you're a member, obviously, we're giving members a 5% on top of their normal discount for anything you get. Whether, if you get 6 bottles, we just take your normal 6-bottle rate and add 5% to that, or 12 bottles, same thing. And then for non-members, we have specials on, I think it's 10% off 6 bottles and 15% off a dozen bottles and free shipping on those. And for members, We'll certainly ship anything over 6 bottles for free right now, and if you're local and you want your club shipped to you, we'll ship your 3 bottles for free to you. No big deal. So
this is going to cut off any second now. It only goes for an hour. So.
Okay.
Thank
Anyway,
you guys. You can always email the website directly. Email Steve, and
Yep.
we can handle your orders personally. It's him and me doing this stuff. So.